After nearly 15 years on the market, production of the 5th generation Toyota 4Runner is about to come to an end. A sad day for Toyota enthusiasts around the country. But the good news is there are hundreds of thousands of these rigs available used. Here's what you need to know before you buy one, and we're going to find out some of the key features by taking this one on an Alaskan off-road adventure. The 5th generation of Toyota 4Runner launched for the 2010 model year, and it was a pretty big departure from the 4th generation. Gone was the optional V8 engine, and in was a whole new string of styling changes and interior tech improvements. Now, this vehicle is getting up there in age, considering we're looking at the new gen launching later this fall. It's gonna be on the market for about 15 years. That's not to say though, this isn't still very much a daily livable, daily drivable vehicle. So let's talk about some of the things you need to know from the outside. The 4Runner was available in one body configuration, a 4-door station wagon design. The doors are not removable and the windshield does not come down like a Jeep Wrangler. Now, the design of the 4Runner is going to depend a lot not only on the year, but on the model that you purchase. The early ones are a little bit less desirable. It seems that the Toyota community likes to look at those a little bit less. They were facelifted partway through the cycle of the 4Runner to this newer body style, which is a little bit more aggressive, and I think folks like this design a little bit more. But it's worth noting, like a limited, even a newer limited, is going to have a very different look than something like this SR5 model. Now, one thing we're going to notice on 4Runners is the huge range of modifications that are available for these vehicles, and some are better than others, and we'll talk about what to look for when buying a 4Runner. For example, this is the stock front end off of a TFL-Off-road, where this 4Runner has actually had some of the bumper material trimmed off for better clearance. And you know, are there good and bad versions of the modifications? Yes, absolutely. The 4th generation of Toyota 4Runner uses an independent front suspension with a solid rear axle. And in 2024, a lot of the used ones you find are going to be lifted in one way or another. And it's definitely worth asking the person selling the 4Runner, who makes the lift kit, when was it installed, and where was it installed? Because there are certainly high-end and low-end suspension setups that can greatly change the ride quality of the 4Runner. And it's also worth noting, have the control arms been upgraded or are they stock? Because that is also going to greatly change the way that these vehicles ride. Now, the problem with some of these lift kits, especially the lower quality ones, is they're gonna ride pretty rough from the factory, and miles aren't gonna improve them. So some of the cheaper lift kits, especially if you have 80, 90, 100,000 miles on an quote-unquote upgraded shock, is gonna ride pretty poorly. And that's something worth budgeting a couple $1,000s if you need to redo the lift kit on your 4Runner. Now, it's also worth noting that tire sizes are going to vary as well, and depending on who did the lift kit, in some cases they might chop some of the inner fender well or the bumper to clear larger tires. If it was me, I would much prefer to buy a 4Runner like this that hasn't had any body modifications. And yeah, stuff like bumpers can be easily replaced, but if we're talking about cutting into the front fenders or into the rear quarter panels, that is some pretty structural changes to the vehicle that's going to be really hard to remedy down the road. So the general rule of thumb I like to buy the most stock vehicle I possibly can. And yes, it may not look as cool, but I like to buy stock and then do the mods myself, because I know what I'm adding to the vehicle. I know who's adding what to the vehicle, because, you know, let's be honest, not all these installers are going to be as quality as others. And then I know how it's done and where it's done, and the whole gamut of things. So I would much prefer to buy a stock 5th gen 4Runner than something like a modified one, do it myself, and then know it's going to be good to go. The other thing worth noting is, like, these 4Runners came to us via a rental company here in Alaska, Alaska Overlander. And this is a cool company. You can actually come out here, rent an out-kitted 4Runner and have a great time in Alaska. That's great for renting one, but I wouldn't want to maybe buy one from this company that has seen many miles of rough off-road use, and it's far less likely that a stock one would have been messed with over the years than one like this that's lived all of its life off-road. That's just my opinion. Now I'm out here today with BF Goodrich, who flew me out to Alaska to check out the new KO3, their new all-terrain tire. And this is a tire perfectly suited to the 4Runner. It really represents what the 4Runner is all about, which is a great mix of daily drivability and off-road capability and longevity. So BF Goodrich is constantly, incrementally improving their all-terrain tires. And for this new generation that has replaced the KO2, it now lasts longer and performs better in gravel and on long dirt roads. It's got a lot of forward bite. It's got better snow performance, or so they tell me, and it can be had in a huge number of tire sizes. So check them out if you want a good all-terrain for your Alaskan adventure or even your Starbucks adventure. So our trusty rig for today is a 2018 Toyota 4Runner, 89,000 miles, and maybe we got some mud in these brakes. It's got a little bit of a lift on it, and what's interesting is that this is not a TRD version of the 4Runner. This is actually, I think, an SR5 because there's no locker, but there is A-track. So we're going to see how this vehicle performs, and let's see how the traction is with these KO3s. Now, this vehicle is actually a really cool story. It's one of the vehicles by Alaska Overlander, and they are a company that basically kits out and then supplies vehicles to folks that want to come up to Alaska, go on an adventure, but just want to pack their clothes and nothing else. They're ready to go for your adventure. So that's kind of a cool concept. But let's see how this thing does. So we're in low range in kind of this cool mud pit area. A little bit of a quarry section here, and we're gonna run this thing up some hills, and let's see how the traction is in this SR5 4Runner. So first up, nice kind of loose sand here that's been super covered in rain. Rainy season here in Alaska. Let's go A-track on, and then we're gonna tackle this hill. So we're gonna take it about 4 miles an hour in low range. These tires are aired down to about 25 PSI. Beautiful, okay. So far, first impression, good result. So we had a lot of forward bite up that hill, and then the 4Runner just kind of rocketed up that with no difficulty. So pretty impressed there. And look, this is an interesting thing about Toyotas, is everybody that tackles the off-road world goes straight to the TRD off-road, or a lot of folks are going to TRD Pro now. You don't need them. You really don't. A standard SR5 with four-wheel drive and A-track and a decent set of rubber will get you places that you just simply wouldn't believe. They don't have the fancy TRD branded skid plates or some of the cool graphics on them, but to be honest with you, they got everything you need to have fun. 4-low, A-track, recovery points, and that 4-liter V6. Come on, baby. Oh yeah, like a boss, absolutely no difficulty. So yeah, I mean, first impressions of this SR5 and the tires, so far so good. Haven't done anything too technical yet, but maybe throughout the day we're gonna find some harder stuff and see what these bad boys can do. The next aspect you're going to have to decide is what trim of 4Runner should I purchase. And there are really 4 primary trims throughout the line. Of course, being on sale for 15 years, there were a bunch of changes and some other special editions throughout the years. But on the base end is the SR5. Then, starting in the off-road trims, we're going to find the TRD Off-Road. Then at the top dog of the off-road trims, the TRD Pro. And then there's a luxury-oriented version called the Limited. Now, the way best to tell the 2 most popular trims, the SR5 from the TRD Off-Road, some subtle design differences, obviously badging, but the big difference is that the TRD Off-Road is going to come equipped with the rear locking differential and this crawl control setup, which we can see up here on the overhead console. So there is the rear locking diff. Here is crawl control, and this right here is called multi-terrain select. So the TRD Off-Road and the TRD Pro can actually allow you to dial in the 4Runner for a variety of terrain. So if you're going over rocks or sand or mud or snow or whatever, you can dial in that multi-terrain select and allow that to happen. Now, if you look at this SR5 version that we've been driving today, it's not going to have that rear locking diff. And it's also not going to have that cool crawl control and multi-terrain select system. Instead, all we're going to find is an A-track button. Now, ATREC stands for Advanced Traction Control. And what that does is it uses the brakes to simulate a locking differential to get you unstuck in a variety of situations. Now, from my experience, the ATREC system works pretty darn well. And what you got to ask yourself is, what kind of terrain am I going to be using this 4Runner in? If you are regularly taking your 4Runner through trails that Onyx Off-Road rates at more than a 5 out of 10, then I would strongly suggest getting a 4Runner with the off-road pack or the TRD Pro pack, because that's going to give you the rear locker and the crawl control. You are a heavy use off-roader. If you're an occasional off-roader and you're like, look, I like dirt roads, I like mild trails, I like service roads, just get the SR5. There are some other differences, suspension differences. The SR5 is also not going to be quite as beefy underneath with some of the skid plating, but it's gonna do everything that you ask of it. These things, even in bone stock configuration with 4-wheel drive, you can still get these in 2-wheel drive, don't do that, are gonna be good. Now, if you're looking at two identical 4Runners and same mileage, same everything, and the TRD Off-Road is just a little bit more expensive, sure, then maybe I'd step up to that. But guys, don't be afraid of an SR5. Because they're really pretty good. Now, the Limited is a slightly different story, and the big difference, other than having some nicer interior bobbles and boops, is actually going to be down here in the 4-wheel drive selector. So the 4Runner uses a part-time 4-wheel drive selector, and there's 3 primary positions. There's a 2 high, which powers the rear wheels, a 4 high, which powers all 4, and then a 4 low, which engages the low range set of gears in the transfer case. Now, that Limited is going to have another option for a full-time all-wheel drive setting. That's a full-time system, and that is actually very desirable to a lot of folks, especially who live in a snowy environment. The thing is if I'm cruising through the snow, and maybe I forget to stick it in 4-wheel drive and I go around a corner, that rear end's gonna come swinging around and I better get ready to Tokyo drift. Whereas that Limited trim with the full-time system is always gonna have all 4 wheels engaged. Now, there are some downsides, right? The Limiteds are very bougie. They're not quite as off-road capable. I wish you could get that full-time system in like a TRD Off-Road or TRD Pro. But if you're never taking your 4Runner off-road, be honest with yourself, people. Don't buy your off-roaders if you're never taking them off-road. Then just get the Limited, and it's a nicer interior. It's full-time 4-wheel drive, a little better in the snow for that reason. So that's an important consideration, I think, that a lot of people overlook. Now, the off-roading in Alaska has been really interesting. It's been a lot of 2-track, nothing super technical, at least the area we're at, but the views, look at the views, absolutely incredible. Especially if you come here in September, you're 100% gonna get wet, but you're gonna have some of the most incredible views I have ever seen. Absolutely gorgeous and incredible. This is truly an amazing state, and I'm so fortunate to be able to come out here. And it's tough to get to. It's a little inhospitable, but if you can make it once in your lifetime, you have to. It is that cool. They all have the same 4-liter V6, and they all have good power on paper. The problem with 4Runners, driving them from a modern perspective, is they only have 5 ratios. So when you're going up like a long stretch of highway, especially at altitude, you get kind of this uncomfortable situation where the engine is either screaming its nuts off or then bogs as it upshifts, and you get kind of this weird bounce back and forth. The plus side of that is these are the vehicle equivalent of Twinkies, and they just never die. They just go and go and go and go and go, and they get like 18 mpg. Okay, maybe not this one with the lift, but they use a lot of gas, but as long as you keep oil in them, they should be fine. And that's why you want to buy a 4Runner, right? A lot of folks buy these because maybe they're not car people, they just want their car to go places they think they can't take the RAV4, and they want it to go 150,000 miles. And you're gonna find in the used market, especially the early ones, a lot of them have over 200,000 miles. Now, off-road like we are today, any 4-wheel drive 4Runner, excuse me, any 4-wheel drive 4Runner is going to have a low range. You stick it in low, and they perform really well. They're really nicely sprung, and they are very capable. Now, they're not a rock crawler like a Wrangler with the solid front axle and the sway bar disconnect, but a lot of Toyota people will definitely make them into them if you want to go that amount of money with lifts and with control arm changes and spring changes and that kind of thing. But they're just solid, overall, well-driving vehicles. They're really quiet on the highway, they're untemperamental off-road, and they just go forever.
Coming in hot.
Now these 4Runners will have a slightly different interior based on the model year and spec, but they're all very rugged and utilitarian with a lot of kind of harder black plastics, but they all do the job. Now some of these older 4Runners might have a smaller screen, some with Apple CarPlay, some without, but they all have big chunky buttons to select different settings for the climate control, and they also have overhead switches, which is just objectively the coolest place to put switches, and old school mechanical gauges, like a Bugatti Tourbillon. So really, that's what a 4Runner and a Bugatti have in common, but the seats, leather or cloth, are all fairly comfortable and all fairly durable. More modern 4Runners will also have tech like adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring as standard. So definitely shop around. If there's certain options that you want, like adaptive cruise control, you may have to spend a little bit more and get a slightly newer 4Runner, but they're all pretty good. Now talking about towing, these 4Runners have a towing capacity of about 5,000 pounds, and at sea level, that's just fine. If you're planning on towing like up here in Alaska, 6,000 feet above sea level, maybe drop that number down to closer to 3.5 or 4, because up some of the steep grades, you're going to be struggling certainly a little bit. Well there, folks, I hope you found this little video informative and kind of let you go into buying a used 4Runner with a little bit of a better understanding on what to expect. And big thank you to BFG for flying me out and checking out the new KO3. We got a full podcast video up over at TFL Talk if you want to learn more. And as always, this has been Tommy. We'll see you guys next time over at alltfl.com. I am going to go get out of the rain because I am very wet.